It's more than just another radio show. It's a beacon of truth. Fasten your seatbelt and find out why they call Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers the dynamic deacon. Join Deacon Harold for a fast-paced hour that sheds encouraging light on today's culture. Welcome to Beacon of Truth with your host, Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Beacon of Truth. I am your host, Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers, and you're listening on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. And boy, you hear that expression, time flies. Or, when you raise your kids and then you turn around and you see all of a sudden they're teenagers, you say, where did the time go? Man, this is going by so fast. Well, believe it or not, we're only a week away from Lent. I mean, it just felt like 2024 was over. Now we're into the new year. We just seem to be, getting started. All of a sudden, Lent is upon us, and so just a week away from Ash Wednesday, and it's been, boy, it really has gone by fast, hasn't it? We're already almost into the third month of the year. So again, as I always say, when I reflect on this, when I wax poetic on this stuff, is just, we can't waste time. We can't keep procrastinating about relationships, about projects and things we want to do with our life. Oh, I'll wait until, I'll put it off until, and we make excuses, and then things never get done in our life. Relationships never get healed, and God is not able to really fulfill what He wants to do in our life because we won't allow Him to. So just get off the dime and get it done. Because time is short. I always think of Psalm 90, which is the first psalm in book 4 of the Psalms 90 through 106, and that was written by Moses. And he says, "Our span is 70 years, or 80, for those who are strong, and most of these are toil and pain. They pass swiftly, and we are gone." Right? We only got one shot at this thing. So instead of, spending time, parked in front of the television, right? And again, I'm not saying that television watching is bad, but when things need to get done in our life, and we're constantly thinking something's in our mind, something's in our heart, let's work ever more diligently to bring healing into our lives so God can accomplish His will in a very powerful way in and through us. Sinners though we are, imperfect though we are, God can still use us for His glory. So just, again, some pre-Lenten thoughts here, as we move closer to this very beautiful, very penitential season of Lent coming up. All right, so something to think about, and very excited today. We're going to talk with Dr. John Acquaviva about faith, sports, and exercise, as articulated in two very, very good books that he has. Is this often? I don't know if we make these connections often enough as Catholics. About the connection, because we're holistic beings, right? Body, mind, and soul. And we spend a lot of time talking about the soul, obviously, right? Which, are how we're fed and nurtured by the sacraments in the church. And we even had a show, remember, about the books. What books bring your spirit to life? What books inspire you to move into a deeper relationship with Jesus? So, and we spend a lot of time talking about the soul and the mind, right? So we talk about how we can go deeper in our faith by learning more about our faith. Then we talk about, for example, this show and podcasts and all the different ways in social media and different platforms that our faith is brought to us, like the Bible in a Year by Father Mike Schmitz and things like that, that bring us deeper in our faith. We talk about also developing the mind so we can think more deeply and clearly with the heart of Christ. But one thing we often don't talk about a lot is the body component, right? Because we are human beings with physical bodies, and so there's an integration there between body, mind, and soul. And so we have probably the foremost expert in this area as far as making those connections between body, mind, and soul in the context of faith and sports and exercise. And these are things that sometimes we don't think about. Like, for example, when I watch sports, I'm not thinking about faith. Like I said, I rarely watch television, which means I rarely watch sports. But on those occasions that I do, I mean, I'm not thinking about a spiritual connection there. When I was participating in sports in high school, I went to a Catholic high school, and I was, as some of you know my story, I was a pretty outstanding athlete and wrestler in high school. But the only time I ever thought about faith when I was on the mat was the prayer. We had obviously with the Catholic school, we had a chaplain. The prayer before the match or something like that. And then exercise. I personally struggle with the exercise because I mean I don't mind exercising, going to the gym and doing my walks and things like that. But when I get busy, when I'm traveling, I'm on the road, I'm overseas. Like you guys know, I did over 250,000 miles traveling last year, and with all the because I have to bring equipment with me so I can do the radio show on the road, and I'm bringing products and I'm bringing clothes, investments. And on top of that, I have to bring workout clothes. It's just it becomes too much. And then okay, where am I going to have time to this? Because everybody's demanding my time, and I don't want to make excuses for not exercising, but I've been really committed at the beginning of this year to really make the body component a much higher priority, in the way I'm eating and dieting, because all of that really affects my ability to be able to do the work that God has called me to do. So I'm really excited to talk with Dr. John Acquaviva today about faith, sports, and exercise and the two books that he has. So it's awesome. Would love you to participate in the show today. Send us an email, beacon@EWTN.com. And again, I love bringing this show each and every day because of the great folks we have working behind the scenes, like Matt Gabinski screening the calls and Michael McCall doing social media, and the one and only Ace McKay working the boards and producing the show. How you doing, Ace?
I'm good. That is how I do my workout every day. I just work the controls and just, make sure that, extra calories, finger weights, whatever it takes.
Yeah, and I just what I think what helps me the most is to try to get into a routine.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm home, when I'm not traveling, like at the beginning of this year, like for the first month, usually it builds up, right? So January's not that busy, February is busier, then bam, Lent hits, and I'm literally just gone, like weeks at a time away from home. So when I am home, I get up in the morning. I pray my office, and then after praying, I go for my walk, usually about a 5-mile walk. And I first thing I do is the rosary, and I got some devotional prayers that I do as I'm walking. So I mean that's a great way,
Mm-hmm.
but when I'm traveling, I have to get up in the morning, go to the airport, I pray the office in the lounge, get on a plane, get off. They usually take me to dinner somewhere, and then bam, I'm in it. So, okay,
Yeah.
when is it time to exercise? Like, I'm at the hotel or I'm in a rectory. The priest may not have equipment there. That means I have to take a Lyft or an Uber or something to get to a gym. I mean, it's just sometimes logistically, it's too hard with the masses and the talks at high schools and all the other things, the parish events, the conferences that I'm doing. Again, not trying to make excuses, but it's hard to fit all of that in.
Yeah.
When I'm traveling. So I'm trying to be this year really being more conscious of how to make all those connections together.
Yeah, and I'm not like one to go to the gym. That's not like sweating in front of strangers is not my favorite way to stay fit. So I would much rather work out at home. So what I found that's always worked for me, and I don't work out every day, but when I do, I try to do the things that either excite me or like I can put on just the right playlist, and you get that eye of the tiger moment where you're like, yeah, I got this, and you're curling, whatever it is. But I find the workouts are much more, I can attain that daily routine or regular routine if it's something I enjoy doing.
Yeah, that's so true. And my wife, is she's a runner, and she's been she ran the marathon a couple years ago in Paris, France, and then in Maui in
Yeah.
Hawaii. And she's but she has some injuries, some knee injuries and some shin injuries, some plantar fasciitis. And so we created like a little bit of a home gym. She's been seeing a personal trainer. We created a little bit of a home gym so she can at least try to recover so she can continue to run. Because, we're getting older, so all that's going to end soon.
Our bodies hate
I'm
us.
very excited. Yeah, exactly, exactly. But excited to talk to John Acquaviva today about faith, sports, and exercise. And would love you to participate in the program today, my friend. Send us an email, beacon@EWTN.com. Yeah. I love those songs that have that little pause there, and then you just wait for it, bam, and it just drops.
There's nothing like a good break, and then you're like, yeah, it's that goosebump up the back of your neck. You're like, oh, I wasn't expecting that. I love that.
Yeah. Again, this reminds me of one of those 70s movies kind of grooves.
Yeah.
Like in a movie, kind of that background music, like in the beginning, when they're setting up the movie, and like the early credits are rolling, that music's playing in the background. In those 70 films, this definitely reminds me of that.
That's the thing I love about like Marvel movies. They've taken a lot of the hits from our childhood and have made them sequences within, these actions of things happening in galaxies far, far away. But then the kids are like, that's a great song. I'm like, watch. And then you pull it up off the original album, and they're like, you already downloaded it. Like, of course.
Yeah.
It is one of the originals.
Exactly. Yeah, it's so funny because they think that they're discovering something new. And it's like, nah, been there, done that.
Oh, yeah. One of my favorite trends is watching moms or dads blow their kids' minds with revealing samples that are in their new music. And they're like, oh,
yes.
Mom, check out this song. And they're like, you know what that is? And they'll pull up the original. And it's like, And they're like, oh,
yeah, exactly.
Okay. I thought this was new. So
exactly. Oh, that's awesome. Well, I'm Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers, and you're listening to Beacon of Truth. And today we're going to be talking very shortly with Dr. John Acquaviva about faith, sports, and exercise, and the two books that he's written on these topics. Would love to hear from you today, my friends. Send us an email, beacon@EWTN.com.
Want to remind you that, of course, this afternoon you can check out Ave Maria in the afternoon with Dr. Marcus Peter. He is definitely taking theology in a way that allows us to see it through current events and also how we need to be looking at those current events through our faith. So that's, of course, 5 o'clock Eastern on EWTN Radio.
All right, my friends. Well, when you hear that music, that means it's time for the Soulful Psalms segment of Beacon of Truth. This is where we take the Psalms, the book of sung praises from the wisdom literature of the Old Testament, and we make a connection between the Psalms and your everyday life. Why? Because we hear the Psalms every day in the holy sacrifice of the Mass. And so we say, well, why make a deeper connection between the Psalms and your life? And the great thing is that this Soulful Psalms segment of Beacon of Truth is its own podcast. That's right. You can go to Podcast Central at EWTN.com, or you can listen on the EWTN app, or even your favorite secular podcast platform, like iTunes or Spotify or SoundCloud or whichever one that you would like, and listen to this part of the show, Soulful Psalms, as its own podcast. As usual, I'm using the Revised Grail Psalms, which were approved by the U.S. bishops for use in the Mass and compiled by the Benedictine monks of Conception Abbey. Today, we're going to take a look at the last couple verses of Psalm 12. We've looked at most of Psalm 12. We're going to finish this psalm off now. And if you remember when we looked at this psalm earlier, the prescript or the superscript of this psalm is the entire first verse. Now we know that Psalm 12 is in book 1 of the Psalms, so all the Psalms in book 1, Psalms 1 through 41, are attributed to David. And so the superscript says, for the choir master upon the 8th chord, a psalm of David. So there are a number of these psalms that has instrumentation. It says on string instruments. This one says upon the 8th chord. So in Hebrew, it's actually shemanith. So it says for the choir master, or the same word in Hebrew for the leader, for the choir master on the shemanith, which is translated in English as 8th chord. Now, we're not exactly sure what that instrument is. Like if you Google it, you'll see different interpretations of what they think the shemanith is. Um, uh, so it's a specific instrument that David wanted and had in mind when he wrote this psalm. All right, so we have that, a psalm of David, Mizmor David. And so we're going to take a just look at the last couple verses here of Psalm 12. So if you have your Bibles, grab them and take a look at verses 7 through 9. So 7 says, David says, the words of the Lord are words without alloy, silver from the furnace, 7 times refined. Right? So he's talking about the word of the Lord being pure. So like when you go into the ground and when miners take out ore from the earth, gold or silver or some kind of precious metal, it has dirt and it has soil and it has imperfections in it. And so they have to heat it up to extract what they call the slag, or all of the stuff that they don't want. They separate the slag from the ore, and so they can get the pure ore out of that. So he says God's word is like that. It's like in the furnace, 7 times refined. Of course, 7 is a number of perfection and completion for the Israelites. And so he said God's word is pure and it's perfect. It is you, O Lord, who will keep us safe and protect us forever from this generation. All right, so the Lord is the one who's our protector. He's the one who's going to save us from this generation. There's nothing in this generation that's going to bring salvation. So we cannot put our hopes in the things of the world, because God is above the world. God is beyond it. God created the world. God created everything that exists, and that's who our trust should be in. And he ends in verse 9, for the wicked prowl on every side. Very reminiscent of, I think it's 1 Peter chapter 5, where he talks about the devil is like a roaring lion, lying in wait to pounce upon his prey. So very reminiscent of 1 Peter. The wicked prowl on every side, while baseness is exalted by the sons of men. Boy, how true is that in our culture today? The baseness of pornography and the licentiousness and all those things that just focus on the physical, on the ephemeral, with a serious disconnect between the interconnection between the body, mind, and soul, which is exactly what we're talking about today. So, my friends, I'd like to introduce you now to our guest on today's show, Dr. John Acquaviva. He holds a PhD, so he's actually Dr. John Acquaviva. He holds a PhD in exercise science, is a professor at Wingate University in North Carolina. He teaches there strength and conditioning, sports nutrition, and exercise physiology. He has a radio show called Faith and Sports in North Carolina Catholic Radio, which is syndicated weekly on Radio Maria. And actually, when I first started doing radio, my very first radio program was on Radio Maria. Actually, it was called From the Rooftops. And John resides in Matthews, North Carolina, with his wife Alicia and their 5 young children. So I'd like to welcome to Beacon of Truth, Dr. John Acquaviva. Well, welcome to the show, Doctor. Great to have you here.
It's great to be here, Deacon. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, sure. So this is your first time on the show, and so there's people that's listening that may not know who you are.
Yeah.
So just to get to people, just to get to know you a little bit, can you tell us a little about maybe about your faith journey? Were you always Catholic? Are you a convert? You know, how did God come into your life, and how did you make this connection between sports and exercise physiology and kind of the spiritual life of a Catholic?
Very good. Yes, always been a Catholic. With a name like Aquaviva, you are born into the faith, brother. Born and raised in the city of Detroit, went to Catholic school all 12 years, and altar boy for several of those years, even into high school. And it was, especially like reflecting on it, it was part of my reversion. I'm not a convert, but a lot of people know of the term reversion. I'm a revert. Right around the age of 25, I started reading scripture for the first time. In fact, it was Peter, the first book of Peter, that really brought me back to the faith. Boy, did that make sense to me. And I started to go deeper into my Catholic faith. And of course, I saw it ultimately as the truth, and I've been practicing it strongly ever since. And to address your second question, a few years ago on Radio Maria, there was a gal, I think she goes by the Bible Lady, and her first name was Gal, and she was on Radio Maria, and she heard about my book on improving your body image through Catholic teaching. And we had a mutual friend, and she's here in Charlotte, North Carolina. And she said, John, will you come on my radio show to talk about improving your body image through Catholic teaching? She goes, this sounds fascinating to me, how you've made this connection as an exercise physiologist and our Catholic faith. And she had me on for a segment, had me on for a second segment, asked me in the break to be on the following week. She goes, gosh, you have so much to say here. Long story short, she said, will you talk to the director at Radio Maria, because I think you have the basis for a radio show. And I said, well, I'm not a radio guy. I've never done that. And she said, I think you have something here. So eventually I came up with the idea of simply called Faith and Sport. And what I do on this radio show each week on Radio Maria is I make the connection between our involvement in sport as a fan, as a parent of an athlete, as a referee, as an administrator. I tie into the whole discussion on sport, which there's hundreds of stories every week that are out there, some of them good, some of them negative, and so forth. But I directly relate to our faith. And in particular, I kind of drive it through the terms of character, morality, and ethics. And as we know, there's a whole lot to be said about sport and those three terms: character, ethics, and morality. So that's why I'm here. And then that leads to the second book I wrote that just came out last year, Improving Your Sportsmanship Through Catholic Teaching. So they have similar beginning of the titles: Improving Your Sportsmanship Through Catholic Teaching and Improving Your Body Image Through Catholic Teaching. And at some point, we can talk about how those two worlds have intersected. But that's my story, Deacon.
Oh, that's awesome. Yes, we will be definitely diving into both books in the next segment. But yeah, Gail's a good friend of mine. And she's still on Radio Maria. Yeah, she was Gail Attenberry back then, but her husband died and she remarried, and
Yep.
She's
And now it's Buckley, correct?
Barringer.
Barringer.
Yeah,
Okay,
Barringer.
got it.
I think Buckley was her maiden name, actually.
Oh, got it. Okay. So
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
but
I had that right.
yeah, she's a good friend, and so I love that connection there too. So yeah, I'm very much looking forward to diving into this topic. I think it's something that's very important because think about it, what's happening with sports now. Like for example, when I think about the NCAA,
Yeah.
like with like football, right? With Alabama, with the coach, longtime coach, like an icon, how he quit because they were changing. Sports was becoming like more, we're more like the professional kind of thing, where they're paying
Right.
athletes and things like that were coming in.
Right.
So excited to talk about this. All right, we're going to continue our discussion with John Aquaviva about faith, sports, and exercise on Beacon of Truth. Send us an email, my friends, beacon@EWTN.com. Yeah, this reminds me like when I was playing in a jazz band in college. You know, sometimes before Father George got there, who was the director of the jazz band at the time, we used to play stuff like this just to kind of warm up and get our fingers loose and get things moving before we actually had to like dive in and start playing jazz.
Yep.
So this is brings back some fun memories for me.
Yeah, the sound check jam is always my favorite because you never know what's going to birth. And if it's junk, you're like, all right, it's a sound check. Let's play a song. But if it comes into something like, hey, what are you doing there? You know, it's the best.
Yeah, because sometimes they'll play songs like they need to work on, but sometimes they'll play a groove, you know, as they're getting level set and things like that. And who knows, that could turn into a song.
Yeah.
You know, for a lot of bands on tour do that actually.
Yep.
They're constantly writing and developing new material while they're on the road. And,
Guns N' Roses' Sweet Child of Mine started that way. It was Slash's warm-up soundcheck song, that riff, and they're like, hey, play half the notes. And that's where that do-do-do-do-do-do-do.
Yeah,
that's how that...
exactly. And even Eruption by Van Halen, which is not a song, but that was kind of a warm-up exercise that he was doing. And Ted Templeman, who was the producer on that Van Halen 1 record, said, hey, wait a minute, you should put that on the record. It's like, wait, this is just warm-up. What are you talking about? And obviously it's just like legendary classic. Like every guitar player now learns Eruption, you know?
Oh,
So
for
it's
sure.
just,
No doubt.
It's awesome. It's awesome how that works. All right. Well, I'm Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers, and you're listening to Beacon of Truth. And today we're joined by Dr. John Acquaviva, and of course his last name means water of life. And he's going to talk to us about faith, sports, and exercise, particularly through two books that he has written, which we're going to be talking about soon. So again, stay tuned. This is going to be a very fascinating discussion about, again, the connection between faith, sports, and exercise. Would love for you, my friends, to be part of the program today. Send us an email, beacon@EWTN.com.
Of course, don't forget, EWTN offers the Holy Sacrifice of the Mass, 8 Eastern, every morning, Monday through Friday, in EWTN radio and television. You can get your Mass Guide book. That way, if you're new to the Catholic faith, you can definitely be a part of the service. Find out more when you check it out at EWTN.com/Catholicism.
All right. So Dr. John Acquaviva has a doctorate in exercise science and is a professor at Wingate University, where he teaches strength and conditioning, sports, nutrition, and exercise physiology. And he also has a radio show on Radio Maria called Faith and Sport. So we're going to talk about two books. The first book being Improving Your Body Image Through Catholic Teaching, How Theology of the Body and Other Church Writings Can Transform Your Life. And then we'll dive into the second book, which he said was released last year, Raising Kids with a Healthy Body Image, a Guide for Catholic Parents. So welcome back to Beacon of Truth, Dr. Acquaviva.
Thank you, Deacon. It's great to be here. Let's get into these conversations. I am so thankful that you had me on this show.
All right. Well, thanks. So the first book, Improving Your Body Image Through Catholic Teaching.
Yeah.
So and the subtitle talks about the theology of the body.
Yeah.
And other church teaching can so that is a very interesting connection, because often when we think about the theology of the body, which is of course that deep, rich, beautiful teaching of St. John Paul II, which is a compilation of a number of Wednesday audiences, where he talked about the connection, like an anthropology, a Christian anthropology of the body. But most people, when they hear theology of the body, connect it with human sexuality or celibacy or something like that. But you're talking about improving body image through theology of the body. So what was your inspiration, or how'd you make that connection and connect it to your area of expertise?
Yeah, that idea came from my wife even before we started dating. She holds a master's degree in theology of family and marriage. And one time she said, I was talking about a book idea and I couldn't quite articulate the idea. And she said, you should take JP2's theology of the body and connect it what you do in exercise science. And so I started reading a little more about it. I was introduced to it a couple of years prior to this conversation. And one of the things that precipitated this book, in fact, it was the actual fire behind this whole idea of this book, is yes, a lot of people understand these 100+ talks by John Paul II in relation to like sexual relations with your wife and conception and so forth, how the man and the woman's body go together and so forth. But what I took was a part of JP2's teaching in which he said we were embodied for a reason. God easily could have made us spiritual beings, but he embodied us for a reason. And the question is, why did he do that? We have to ask, why did he do this? And if we delve into this, especially through our catechism, especially through the teachings of theology of the body, it starts to make sense. Because ultimately, Deacon, even for faithful Catholics, they struggle because of social media, because of commercials, because of movies, because of magazines, which still exist. A lot of people don't think magazines are sold, but there's millions of them that are sold each and every week, each and every month. And what we do is we take those images of video, of pictures, of the movie scene, whatever the case is, and we start to compare ourselves to those people. And especially if it's a fitness magazine or a fashion magazine or a model-based magazine, both for men and women, we see these pretty faces. We see these beautiful bodies that, of course, have been partially distorted because they use Adobe Photoshop, right? And a lot of these pictures that we're trying to emulate, we're trying to look like, the person actually doesn't even exist as we see them. And this has hurt our soul. Because ultimately, Deacon, what happens is what's called the social comparison theory. The more we look at these images, the more that we see and spend time with these images, the more we compare ourselves to these images so many times that we cannot not only compare ourselves to, but they don't really even exist. You are of my age, or at least of my generation, and you know of the famous model Cindy Crawford. And
Oh,
one of the
sure.
things she said, in fact, to me, this is her most famous saying. Of course, she's not known for many sayings, but she said, in the morning, I'm not even Cindy Crawford. And I thought that was such good insight to everybody who was a fan of hers, that emulated, that wanted to look like her, be a model, whatever the case was. Because, of course, what she's saying is, I'm made up, hair, the clothes, and of course Photoshop and other computer generated um, uh, uh, venues that help clear the skin, that take away excess fat, whatever the case is. And of course this all leads to this body distortion. People see themselves in the mirror, they think about themselves, their body image from head to toe, and it's just not good enough. And my message is, the body is not something to perfect. The body is something that we should cherish. The body is something that we should respect. And one of the ways that we respect it is through healthy eating, is through daily physical activity and so forth. But the other one is what the Catholic Church and other Christian denominations teach, and that is, for instance, volunteerism. Once we start to devote ourselves to serving others, we start to see our bodies as a tool to serve God. And once we delve into that world of serving others and have this mentality of serving others and do these physical actions, like through our church and through the local food bank, and in so many ways that we can help. And all you have to do is tap into any parish and you ask, how can I volunteer? And that starts to morph into a different mindset, Deacon. We start to see our body as a tool to serve God rather than something to perfect.
I love what you're saying. We're listening to Beacon of Truth. I'm Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers. We're talking to Dr. John Acquaviva about, a couple of his books. This one is called Improving Your Body Image Through Catholic Teaching, How Theology of the Body and Other Church Writings Can Transform Your Life. So I want your take on this, because it seems to me that what you're saying, like the whole Cindy Crawford on the model thing, like the pendulum swung to one side, right? But now, if you look at our culture today, it's like the pendulum has swung completely to the other side. So now we talk about things like fat shaming and things like that.
Yep.
So people celebrating the fat, the fact that they're extremely overweight, that they're quite unhealthy, and that as is something to be celebrated. We just have to accept me because this is who I am and this is my body image. And we talk about body shaming and body type shaming and accepting who you are. Well, wait a minute. So now the pendulum swung the other way because before it was like, oh yeah, no one could achieve that kind of body image, and like you said, it's photoshopped or airbrushed, and anorexia and all that. But now we've totally swung to this other side in our modern culture today, where who you are, who you are as a person is determined by extrinsic factors,
That's right.
not about a relationship with God, but about my body or who I sleep with or who I. So it's completely swung to the other side now. So what I love about what you're doing, Dr. Aquaviva, is kind of bringing it back to the center, right? Bringing it back to a balanced way of understanding relationship between our body and our mind, and healthy eating and relationships, because it really does affect us in real, tangible ways. So I just love what you're doing here. So you can speak to that, where we are now in our culture, and how what you're doing can help bring us back to a just really kind of centered perspective.
Yeah, there's no doubt that the pendulum has swung both ways, but I would say that it's like a clock, though. It's a moving pendulum. In other words,
Mm.
part of our culture says be perfect. The other part says, oh no, be as fat as you want. You don't have to worry about that. But I would argue both sides are problematic, are dangerous to our
Mm.
soul, are
Yes.
dangerous to our actual health. I'm going to go back a couple Christmases ago. I remember this is one of the best parenting things my wife did that I recall on a regular basis. We have five fairly young children. I remember when one of them, Grace, I think she was about 3 years old. And on Christmas morning, Deacon, she took one of her toys and she threw it across the room. And we said, okay, let's put this stuff up. We're going to have lunch right now, or whatever the case was. And she threw it. And I'll never forget, my wife very lovingly and calmly said, sweetie, that was a gift from your grandfather, and he spent money on that, and that is no way to treat a gift that somebody has given you. And I use that analogy in my thought and in my writings to the readership. In other words, when I speak on this to churches or parishes, women's groups, men's groups, whatever the case is, I carry that message on Christmas Day to the people that our body is a gift. We look at a stream, we look at a mountain, we look at a sunset, and we admire that in for all of its beauty, which is great. That is one of the gifts from God for sure. But his masterpiece, as Pius the 12th said, is the human person. God's masterpiece is not that sunset. God's masterpiece is not that mountain scene. God's masterpiece is us. And part of it is the physical nature of us. And we have been taken hostage by social media. We've been taken hostage by magazines and all of these other outlets that cause us to do what I mentioned earlier, the social comparison theory. Rather than seeing our body as a gift and a way to serve God, we see it as something to perfect, and ultimately we gauge our worth on how many people we attracted that day, for instance. And that's why this message is so important, and we need to come to the center, as you mentioned, and put this in perspective and just ask God, why did you make me human? Why did you make me? Why did you give me a body? And these theology of the body writings are a great place to start. I mentioned in the book, Improving Your Body Image Through Catholic Teaching, the sole purpose of it was John Paul II's writings on theology of the body. I spend probably, Deacon, less than 3 or 4 pages talking about theology of the body, but know that it was, for all of its 100+ pages, it was the fire behind those messages, that we were embodied for a reason. We are to respect this body, but more than anything, we are to see it as a gift. And part of our being is to serve others. And we cannot serve others if we don't take care of ourselves. We cannot serve others if we don't demonstrate the volunteerism that is a pillar of Catholic teaching.
Yeah, I love what you're saying because it's the idea of our bodies is not something that's disparate. It's not something that's disconnected from who we are, right? It's integrated. And you talk about taking care of yourself. It's just like on the airplane, right? Because I'm on planes like all the time, and they always say put your mask on first before helping someone else, because if you're not taking care of yourself, you can't be in a position to help other people. So
Yeah.
I love that connection that you're saying. We're talking with Dr. John Acquaviva on Beacon of Truth. I'm your host, Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers, and we're talking about exercise physiology and our faith, the kind of connection between the body, the mind, and the soul. We were talking about his first book, Improving Your Body Image Through Catholic Teaching. Now we want to dive in, I think, into the second book. We'll make sure we have enough time to talk about this book, Raising Kids with Healthy Body Image, a guide for Catholic parents. I think this book is so important today. So many because look, back in the day, we didn't have no social media. We didn't have
That's
we
right.
went outside and played. There was no cell phones. If my mom wanted to call me, she'd stick her head out the window and start yelling. If we weren't running back to the house, from playing in the street or at our friend's house within like a couple minutes, we were in trouble, right? But now kids are exposed to so much. We talked about the body image thing, but also things like pornography, when they're
Yeah.
seeing how bodies are being used as objects for pleasure and gratification. And so they're getting so many mixed messages from our culture. So I love the fact that you created a book that would help parents guide their children through what it is to have a healthy body image. Can you talk about how you came with the idea of this book, and exactly what it can do for parents?
Sure. Referring back to the first book, Improving Your Body Image Through Catholic Teaching, it was meant for teenagers and young adults, but people of all ages, because it's literally up until the age of about 70 that most people, or at least a certain percentage of people, especially women, suffer from body image. But one of the things that came about as I was reading that book was, but I need to start earlier, right? There needs to be a message to parents, to Catholic parents. But in general, this is a universal message. People do not have to be Catholic to understand this message. In fact, so little of it has directly to do with Catholic, like the Mass or the sacraments and so forth. But the reason I wrote this book for parents was because it needs to start early. And what I did was I just gave a lot of tips on what the parent can do, because often when the kid comes 15, 17, 20 years old, sometimes there's too far down that road and there's been severe damage to their soul and severe damage to their body image, that sometimes it's going to take not just months, but years of prayer, years of engaging with the sacraments, and really converting our heart and our actions away from those things that distort our body image. And so, for instance, I talk to parents in this book about the importance of physical activity on a daily basis, why sport is important for so many children. They see their body through a different lens when they participate in sport. I talk about language. I talk about, and the big thing is, Deacon, there's no question about this. The biggest focus I make in this book is we have to limit children's use of social media.
Mhm.
There have been countless number of studies that demonstrate, and it's really come to the surface just in this last year, and you're probably well aware of this, but there have been so many studies over the last few years, but it's really surfaced in the last year, of the damage that it does to people's body image, of the damage that it does to people's psyche, and leading to depression and anxiety and so forth. And this can't be overstated, but the great thing is it's simple as can be. Every minute, every hour that you keep a young child from engaging in social media is another opportunity for them to develop in a healthy way. If they're engaging this at 8, 9, 10 years old, which so many parents allow their children not only access to their phone, but it's unfettered access. So they have Instagram, and they're on Facebook, and they're on Twitter, and they're on TikTok and so forth, and they're constantly seeing these images. And that is the number one rule of this entire conversation is parents, it's a difficult thing to do, but you have to limit that, and you have to put in barriers. You have to put in filters on the phone, because you are saving your child's soul.
Oh, that is so well put, and so very true. You know, my kids are now all adults now, but I can imagine for parents raising kids in the environment and the culture that we're in now, this is something that is extremely important. You know, and why books like this are important is that parents, you know, didn't have to deal with this
That's right.
when they were kids. So now this is a whole new a world, a whole new environment, and so I think books like this are extremely important, especially when it comes to developing a healthy body image. You know, so I'm Deacon Harold Burke Sivers. You're listening to Beacon of Truth, and today we're talking with Dr. John Aquaviva about two of his books. Again, making the beautiful connection between the body and exercise and body image and the mind and the soul, incorporating the beautiful elements of our Catholic faith. We're talking now about his second book, Raising Kids with a Healthy Body Image, a guide for Catholic parents. You know, and sometimes kids, you know how kids can be. They make fun of each other and they tease each other. But now I think it's become, in a sense, more vicious. I remember when I worked in law enforcement for 23 years. And, you know, when you talk about, you know, when kids making fun of each other and on social media and things like that, cyberbullying. You know, the ones who do most of the cyberbullying are girls. I think back when I was again in law enforcement, it's been a little while, but back then, 54% of cyberbullying were done by girls. And a lot of cyberbullying were over things like body image and how
That's right.
someone looked. And again, as you mentioned, Dr. Aquaviva, that's extremely harmful and detrimental. In fact, when I worked as a police chief on the college campus, we used to have the girls not try to commit suicide, but do things like, you know,
Cutting. Yeah.
cutting and things like that as a
Hmm.
way of trying to a cry for help. You know, I can't deal with this by myself. You know, please help me. And when my officers engaged a young lady like this, we'd bring all the resources to bear to really help her. So we'd have, you know, health. We have the health center and residence life and student services and my folks there. We just, how can we help this person? And but what you said is so true. We've seen this over and over again. So I think the younger we can instill positive body image, and also though, you know, not worrying about what other people think about me and the way that I look. Is a lot of it is that they can't even see it within themselves, so it's just easier to mock someone else than
That's
to
right.
deal with the own stuff going on in your own life, in your own situation. So I think this is these books, both of these books, but particularly this second one that we're talking about now, is extremely helpful. Um, so what kind of feedback have you gotten from parents who are using this book?
Yeah, I've gotten a lot of really good feedback from this. In fact, I remember when this first book came out, Improving Your Body Image, I talked to the Women's Conference annual conference in Rochester, New York, and there was over 1,000 women there. And I remember as I was signing the book, people were purchasing. I was so flattered by that. People bought over 100 books of the 1,000 people that were there. And I remember I mentioned during my talk just prior to the book signing that I was coming out. I was currently writing the second book. And I remember so many of the moms going, the other book you're talking about is the one that I really want.
Yeah,
Thought that was
yeah.
interesting. By the way, I know we only have a couple minutes remaining, Deacon, but I just wanted to give a big thank you to another thing you and I have in common, not just Radio Maria, but we are both speakers with CatholicSpeakers.com, correct? You are part of that speaker series? Or,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So we, you know, I've known Joe for a long time, and although
yeah,
I have my own network for speaking, you know, I said, yeah,
got
I'll stay on that platform, and you
got
know,
it.
just to give the boy, because we Catholics need to help each other, you know,
Absolutely. And they were the
each
ones
other.
that brought you and I together. And another thing, and I think this might have confused the listener, but the third book that came out just last year was called Improving Your Sportsmanship Through Catholic Teaching. And I know we're out of time, but I'd certainly,
Oh,
yes,
okay.
yeah, No worries, but I think this is an important thing because so many people are involved in this, especially with Little League, and maybe in the future we can have another conversation on this. But I thank you so much for having me on the show today.
Yeah, so how can people just get these books really quick? Is there a website they can go to get these?
Yeah, you can go to catholicbodyimage.com and you can see all links to all 3 books, or you can, of course, just go to Amazon.
All right. Well, Dr. John Aquaviva, thank you so much for joining us today. Now, remember, you can stream today's show by visiting Podcast Central at EWTN.com/radio. Tomorrow, Word of God Wednesday, Thursday edition, we're going to take a look at the readings for the 8th Sunday in Ordinary Time. Until then, may Almighty God bless you, my friends, the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.